Picture this. You're scrolling through YouTube and a video pops up in your feed. Young guy, expensive car in the background, confident smile. Title, How I Made My First Million at 24. You can too. You watch it, you take notes. You feel fired up. You think, that's it. That's the blueprint. But what if I told you that video might be one of the most dangerous things you've watched today? Not because the guy is lying. He's probably telling the truth. The danger is something else entirely. It's what you don't see. It's what's left off camera. It's the thousands of people who did everything he said and still failed. Nobody's going to make a video about them. Today, we're talking about one of the most underrated cognitive biases out there, survivorship bias. How it works, why it's especially dangerous right now, and what you can actually do about it. Let's start with a story. World War II. American military analysts are studying planes that came back from combat missions. They want to figure out where to add armor to reduce losses. They look at the bullet holes, and a clear pattern emerges. Most hits land on the wings, the tail, the fuselage. The conclusion seems obvious. Reinforce those areas. Then, a statistician named Abraham Wald walks in and says something that stops everyone cold. He says, "Put the armor where there are no bullet holes, the engine, the cockpit." Why? Because the planes they're looking at are the survivors, the ones that made it back. Which means, getting hit in the wings and the tail, survivable. But the planes that took hits to the engine, they never came back. They're not in the data. Nobody sees them. That is survivorship bias in its purest form. We look only at those who survived, who made it, who succeeded, and we draw conclusions about the whole system. But we ignore everyone who isn't standing in front of us. Now fast forward to today. Every day we hear stories of people who dropped out of college and became billionaires. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg. And the takeaway that floats to the surface, college is a waste of time. A degree doesn't matter. Drop out and start building. But wait, how many people dropped out of college and didn't become billionaires? Hundreds of thousands, millions. We don't know their names. Their stories don't end up on magazine covers. They don't get invited to give TED Talks. They just live ordinary lives, or harder ones than they might have had with a degree. Same thing with investing. We hear about the person who put money into Bitcoin in 2011 and got rich. Nobody talks about the people who poured money into hundreds of other cryptocurrencies that went to zero. The ones who lost their savings chasing hype. They're not part of the narrative. They're the invisible losers. This is why survivorship bias is so deadly when it comes to financial decisions. You're making choices based on a distorted sample. You think you're seeing the rule when you're actually seeing the exception.
Let's be honest about what's happening in the motivational content space. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Books, courses, keynotes, podcasts, YouTube channels, online programs, and all of it runs on one simple formula. Find someone who made it and ask them to explain why. Sounds reasonable, right? But there's a fundamental flaw baked into that formula. The person who made it doesn't actually know why they made it. They might think they do. They'll tell you about their discipline, waking up at 5 a.m., cold showers, visualizing goals, their unique work philosophy. And they genuinely believe it. But they can't account for the role of luck, the role of timing, of starting a business exactly when the market was taking off, the role of connections they had from day one, the role of being in the right room at the right moment. Psychologists call this hindsight bias, our tendency to see past events as more predictable than they actually were. Once something happens, we build a story around it where it all seems inevitable. Someone succeeds, and suddenly their whole journey looks like a series of smart decisions, when in reality, it was a series of decisions made under uncertainty, some of which happened to work out. Let's get specific. Take startups. Research consistently shows that around 90% of startups fail within the first 5 years. 90%. But which stories do we hear? The 10%. Airbnb, which was nearly bankrupt 3 times and pulled through. Uber, which kept pivoting until something stuck. The message we absorb, they didn't quit, and that's why they won. But thousands of other founders didn't quit either, and still shut down. Because the market didn't want their product, because the money ran out at exactly the wrong moment, because a well-funded competitor crushed them. Not because of weak willpower, not because of poor discipline, sometimes just because that's how the cards fell. Or take trading. In any financial forum, you'll find people flexing insane returns, plus 200%, plus 500% in the year. And beginners see that and think, okay, so this is possible. I can do this too. What they don't see are the people who blew up their accounts, the ones who ran positive for years and then lost everything in one bad quarter. People with losses stay quiet because it's embarrassing, because there's no reason to brag about a failure, and the picture of reality becomes completely distorted. Now let's talk about what actually happens to us when we consume this kind of content nonstop. First, inflated expectations. When you only see success stories, you start to feel like success is the default, that if you're smart, hardworking, and following the right advice, results are guaranteed. And when reality turns out to be more complicated, and it always does, you assume the problem is you. You're not trying hard enough. You don't believe enough. You're not disciplined enough. Second, comparison paralysis. When you're 28 and you see that someone made their first million at 22, it hits hard. It creates this feeling that you're already behind, that you're on the wrong path, that everyone around you is crushing it while you're standing still. That's a direct route to anxiety, burnout, and chronic dissatisfaction with your own life. Third, bad strategic decisions. And this one might be the most dangerous, because survivorship bias doesn't just mess with your mood, it shapes your actual choices. You put money into something because you heard a success story. You quit a stable job because someone said that's how freedom starts. You copy someone else's strategy without realizing it worked in a completely different context at a different time with different resources.
Researchers who try to understand what genuinely predicts success, not what successful people say about themselves, but what actually correlates with long-term outcomes, arrive at some pretty uncomfortable conclusions. Luck plays an enormous role. Where you were born, your family, timing, connections, these things matter enormously. Economist Robert Frank's research shows that in highly competitive environments, between people of roughly equal talent, it's often luck that determines the outcome. And the more intense the competition, the bigger the role of randomness. This doesn't mean effort is irrelevant. It is relevant, but it's a necessary condition, not a sufficient one. You can't succeed without effort, but effort alone doesn't guarantee success. Psychologist Philip Tetlock, who studied expert forecasting, found that people considered highly successful experts are often no better than random chance at predicting outcomes, but they're incredibly good at constructing convincing narratives for why things happen the way they did. The story creates the illusion of control and understanding, where neither actually exists. Okay, but does all of this mean you should stop reading biographies, stop listening to podcasts with successful people, and ignore everyone else's experience entirely? No, that would just be the opposite mistake. Other people's experience is a valuable resource, but you need to consume it differently. Here are a few principles. Principle 1. Seek out failure stories, not just success stories. Ask, what didn't work? Why did others shut down? What strategies seemed reasonable but failed anyway? That gives you a far more realistic picture of the landscape. Principle 2. Separate the system from the luck. When you hear a success story, ask yourself, how much of this result is actually repeatable? How much depends on unique circumstances, timing, relationships? What can I genuinely apply? And what was just a fortunate accident? Principle 3. Look at base rates. Before starting something, a business, trading, a new career path, research the industry-wide statistics, not just the winner stories. What's the actual success rate? What do average outcomes look like? That gives you a grounded foundation for your decision. Principle 4. Be skeptical of anyone who has all the answers. Real expertise looks like understanding complexity. The person who says, just do this and it'll work, is either oversimplifying or genuinely doesn't realize their own success might have been partially random. The person worth listening to says, here's what worked for me, but I'm not entirely sure why. Here's what's worth testing. Here's where I got it wrong.
Let's make this concrete. What to actually change starting now. If you're thinking about starting a business, don't only read books by successful founders. Talk to people who didn't make it. Find someone who shut their company down. Ask them honestly, what went wrong?
That's some of the most valuable information you'll never find in a bestseller. If you're thinking about investing, stop fixating on stories of people who called it right. Look at long-term data. The majority of active traders underperform the market. That's not an opinion. That's data. Use it. If you're building a career, stop comparing yourself to what you see on social media. Remember, people post their wins, not their losses. Your feed is not reality. It's a highlight reel. Behind every "I made it" are years of attempts you never saw. And most importantly, get comfortable with uncertainty. That might sound strange, but the ability to act without needing guarantees is one of the most important skills you can develop, because reality is uncertain. And people who accept that make better decisions than those chasing a magic formula. Let's go back to the guy with the expensive car from the beginning. He's not a villain. His story might be completely real. His advice might be genuine. But his story is one plane that made it back. And you're making decisions looking only at the planes have returned. Survivorship bias isn't asking you to become a cynic. It's asking you to become more precise, to ask better questions, to look for the full picture, not just the beautiful part of it. Success is real, but it's more complicated than any motivational speech. And your path toward it doesn't start with copying someone else's formula. It starts with seeing reality clearly, with all its uncertainty, randomness, and complexity. That's when you start making decisions that actually work for you.